It all began with something that seemed so small, so insignificant at first glance. A skipped party, just one missed event. But what unfolded after that simple choice would set an entire family on fire. Imagine this. You marry into a family, hoping to build bonds, trust, and a sense of belonging. But instead of acceptance, you find yourself on the receiving end of whispered words, cold stares, and eventually, open hostility. That's exactly what happened to Emily, a young woman who thought she was simply saying no to one gathering, without realizing that one word would unleash a storm. Now, let me take you into Emily's world, a place where family politics collided with personal struggles, where a brother-in-law's rage turned into a full-blown family war. Emily had been married to her husband Daniel for a little over a year. Their wedding had been small, intimate, and local. They never demanded much from anyone, just the presence of loved ones, or at the very least, a thoughtful card. That was enough to make them happy. So when Daniel's brother, Jason, announced his upcoming wedding, Emily thought nothing of it. She expected some travel, a few expenses, and of course, a little bit of effort. After all, weddings usually require that. But Jason and his fiancée, Chloe, weren't planning just a wedding. They were planning a spectacle. 4 bachelor parties, 2 bachelorette weekends, and a week-long overseas ceremony that came with a price tag of nearly $2,000 per guest. At first, Emily tried to stay positive. She smiled politely when Chloe called, rattling off details about the bridesmaids, the dress shopping trips, and the mandatory attendance for every single event. But inside, her stomach twisted. She was facing her own private battle, one she hadn't shared with Jason or Chloe. Emily and Daniel were trying desperately to start a family, and every spare moment, every spare dollar, was going into fertility treatments and their last hopeful vacation that might finally change their lives. Yet Chloe had other plans. "You'll be one of my bridesmaids, won't you?" Chloe insisted over the phone one evening, her tone less of a question and more of a demand. "I was a bridesmaid at your wedding." "It's only fair. And don't forget, we'll be doing multiple dress try-ons. Everyone has to bring their gowns, their shoes, everything. I expect full participation." Emily hesitated. She wanted to be supportive, but the thought of driving 4 hours each way for yet another wine-fueled dress fitting while secretly scheduling doctor visits and counting days on her calendar felt unbearable. Still, she tried to soften the blow. "I'll be cheering you on from afar," Emily told Chloe gently. "I just don't think I can make it to all the events." Her words fell flat. Days later, Jason's name lit up Daniel's phone. What followed wasn't just a conversation, it was an attack. Jason's voice was sharp, furious, filled with accusations. He hurled insults not just at Emily, but at Daniel for allowing his wife to disrespect Chloe. "She's selfish," Jason spat. "She's tearing this family apart." And if she can't bother to show up for Chloe, then maybe she shouldn't bother being part of this family at all. Emily's hands shook as Daniel relayed the words to her. She had been called many things in her life, but hearing that from her own brother-in-law? It cut deep. Here's the thing Jason didn't know. Emily had quietly booked a last-minute trip, one that clashed with one of Chloe's endless pre-wedding events. To anyone else, it might have seemed careless, even disrespectful. But to Emily, it was her last chance, her final desperate attempt to conceive. And she wasn't ready to share that part of her life with people who only seemed to care about champagne toasts and Instagram-worthy moments. As she sat on the couch that night, Daniel's arm around her, Emily felt the weight of a choice pressing down on her. Should she open up about the painful truth she had kept hidden, exposing her vulnerability just to stop the hate? Or should she protect her privacy, even if it meant letting Jason poison the rest of the family against her? Before I tell you what Emily decided, take a quick moment to hit that like button and subscribe. These stories of family drama are just beginning, and trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. Because the deeper Emily fell into this conflict, the uglier it became. The silence from Chloe was deafening. No reply to Emily's message about skipping the dress try-on. No understanding. Just cold, heavy silence that screamed louder than words. And then came the phone calls again. Jason's voice raised, Chloe shouting in the background. Every insult chipped away at Emily's patience. Every accusation made her heart pound faster. And yet, what hurt the most wasn't their anger. It was Daniel's pain. He stood between the woman he loved and the family he had grown up with, torn apart by loyalty, guilt, and rage. Emily began to wonder, was this really about a missed bridal party? Or had Chloe and Jason been waiting for an excuse to push her out all along? The days that followed felt like walking through a storm. Emily could almost sense the whispers moving through the family, like invisible threads pulling people away from her. Every phone call from her mother-in-law, every text message from a cousin carried an edge of tension. She knew Jason had been talking. She could feel it in the sudden distance, the forced politeness, the way people said her name with hesitation. One evening, Emily sat across from Daniel at their kitchen table, the soft hum of the refrigerator filling the silence between them. She finally asked the question that had been clawing at her chest. "Do you think they're turning against me?" Daniel rubbed his temples, exhaustion painted across his face. "I think Jason's been running his mouth. He called Mom last night, said you were manipulative, that you don't care about family, that you think you're too good for Chloe." Emily's breath caught in her throat. Too good for Chloe? She thought of the countless times she had listened patiently to Chloe's long phone calls, nodding and smiling through endless conversations about flower arrangements, dress fittings, and wedding hashtags. She had never once said no out of spite, only out of necessity. And yet here she was, painted as the villain. It was unbearable. But she stayed quiet, letting Daniel's words settle into the pit of her stomach like stones. A few days later, an invitation arrived in the mail. Not for the wedding itself. Emily already had that. This was for yet another event. A pre-bachelorette spa weekend, 4 hours away, with mandatory attendance scrawled in Chloe's handwriting at the bottom. Emily laughed, but it wasn't from joy. It was sharp, hollow, the kind of laugh that hides a breaking heart. She tossed the invitation onto the counter and muttered, "Mandatory. Since when did weddings become military service?" Daniel looked at her, torn between frustration and sympathy. "Maybe you should just tell them," he said softly. "Tell them about what we're going through. About the treatments. About why we can't drop thousands of dollars and spend every weekend driving across the country for Chloe's parties." But Emily shook her head. "No, that's ours, Daniel. That's private. They don't get to know something so raw, something so painful, just because they're throwing tantrums." Her voice cracked. She could feel tears pressing at the edges of her eyes, but she swallowed them down. It wasn't long before Chloe herself reached out. A single text message lit up Emily's phone. "If you can't commit to this, maybe you shouldn't be in the bridal party at all." Emily stared at the words, her hands trembling. She thought of deleting the message, of pretending it never arrived. But instead, she typed back, her fingers moving with a mix of anger and despair. "Maybe you're right. maybe I shouldn't. She pressed send before she could change her mind. That evening, Jason called again. His voice was venom, dripping through the phone. "You've humiliated Chloe. Do you understand that? She cried all night because of you. You're selfish. You're destroying this family," Emily tried to explain, but Jason wasn't listening. His words came faster, louder, until Daniel finally ripped the phone from her hand and shouted back, "Enough! You don't get to talk about my wife that way." The silence that followed was heavy, electric. Then Jason hung up. Emily collapsed into Daniel's arms, shaking. She had never felt so small, so cornered. The man who was supposed to become her brother had turned into her enemy. And yet, beneath the pain, something else began to stir inside her: resolve. She realized she couldn't keep bending, couldn't keep trying to please people who only saw her as an obstacle to their perfect, glittering fairy tale. For the first time, Emily whispered words she had been afraid to say out loud. "Daniel, what if we don't go at all? What if we just skip the wedding?" Daniel's eyes widened. He opened his mouth then closed it again. He had no answer, because deep down, they both knew the truth. Attending the wedding might save appearances, but it would destroy Emily's peace. And what's more important, family approval or protecting your heart? Before we go further, take a moment to like this video and subscribe, because what's about to unfold will push Emily to the edge, forcing her to make a decision that could change her family forever. The next week brought more fallout. Emily's mother-in-law called, her voice dripping with disappointment. "Emily, I don't understand why you can't just go along with things. Chloe is devastated. Jason is furious. Can't you just make an effort?" Emily clenched her jaw, holding the phone tight. An effort? Wasn't she already making an effort, sacrificing her time, her money, her peace of mind, just to keep the peace? But no one seemed to see that. All they saw was a woman who missed a party, a bridesmaid who didn't fall into line. She hung up, her chest tight with rage. She turned to Daniel, her voice trembling. "They'll never understand. Will they? No matter what I do, no matter what I sacrifice, it will never be enough." Daniel pulled her close, but even his embrace couldn't erase the ache inside her. And Emily knew, in that moment, that the choice ahead wasn't just about a wedding. It was about survival. By now, Emily felt like she was living in a tug-of-war she never asked to be part of. On one side was Jason and Chloe, pulling hard with their demands, their accusations, their endless events. On the other side was her own sanity, her health, and the private dream she held close to her heart: starting a family. The gossip had spread further. At a Sunday family dinner, Emily could feel the shift in the room. Conversations stopped when she walked in. Smiles were thin, brittle, fake. One cousin whispered loud enough for her to hear, "That's the one who refused to be in Chloe's bridal party." Her cheeks burned. She tried to sit quietly, to blend into the background. But Chloe's mother leaned across the table and said pointedly, "It's such a shame when people don't understand what family means. Weddings are once-in-a-lifetime events, after all," Emily wanted to scream. She wanted to tell them everything: the doctor visits, the needles, the constant cycle of hope and heartbreak. She wanted to cry out, "Do you think I missed your wine-tasting dress rehearsal for fun?" But she stayed silent, because sharing that truth meant exposing her deepest wound, and these people had given her no reason to believe they would treat it with compassion. Later that night, Emily sat in her car in the driveway, her hands gripping the steering wheel long after the engine had stopped. Daniel sat beside her, staring out the window. Neither of them spoke for a long time. Finally, Daniel whispered, "I don't want to lose my family." Emily's heart cracked. And what about me? Am I supposed to lose myself just to keep them happy? Her words hung heavy between them. It was the first time she had voiced the question out loud. And Daniel had no answer. The days ticked by, and the wedding drew closer. Invitations turned into reminders. Reminders turned into warnings. Jason called again, this time calmer, but his words cut even deeper. If you don't stay the whole week, don't bother coming at all. Chloe doesn't want half-hearted guests. Either you're all in or you're out. Emily's stomach dropped. $2,000 an entire week abroad, multiple events stacked on top of each other. And somehow that wasn't enough? She turned to Daniel after the call ended, her voice shaking with fury. They're not asking us to celebrate with them. They're demanding we worship them, and if we don't, we're disposable. Daniel rubbed the back of his neck, torn between loyalty to his brother and love for his wife. So what do we do? Emily stared at him, her eyes blazing. We decide whose happiness matters more, theirs or ours. Friends began offering advice. Some told Emily to come clean about her fertility struggles, to bare her soul and hope for compassion. Others told her to walk away, to refuse to bow to the toxic demands of people who clearly didn't care about her. At night, Emily lay awake in bed, torn between those two paths. She imagined telling Chloe the truth, only to see her roll her eyes and accuse her of making excuses. She imagined skipping the wedding entirely, only to see herself branded as the family's eternal villain. Either way, she lost. And then came the message that shattered the last pieces of her patience. A group text from Chloe to all the bridesmaids, filled with hearts and exclamation marks, but ending with one cutting line. Everyone who truly cares will be there. No excuses. Emily read it over and over, her pulse pounding in her ears, her vision blurred with tears. She wasn't just being excluded, she was being shamed, publicly. She threw her phone onto the couch and whispered, "Enough." Before I go further, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel, because Emily's story is about to hit a breaking point. And you won't believe what happens when she finally fights back. The next morning, Emily woke up with a clarity she hadn't felt in months. She sat at the kitchen table, a cup of coffee growing cold in her hands, and told Daniel her decision. I'm not going. Not to the bachelorette weekends. Not to the wedding. None of it. Daniel froze. Emily, if you do this, Jason will never forgive us. She met his eyes. Then let him hate me. I'd rather be hated for protecting myself than loved for destroying myself. Her voice didn't waver. For the first time, she felt strong. Daniel looked at her for a long moment. Then, slowly, he nodded. But the decision didn't end the chaos. It ignited it. Within hours of telling Chloe, the phone calls began. Jason's voice thundered through the line. You're dead to this family. Don't bother showing your face again. Emily hung up before he could finish. Her hands were shaking, but her heart felt strangely calm. Because deep down, she knew this wasn't the end of her story. It was the beginning of a new one. The storm had finally broken. Jason's last furious phone call echoed in Emily's ears for days, but instead of fear, she felt something she hadn't expected. Peace. For the first time in months, she could breathe. No more forced smiles, no more pretending she could afford to pour her soul, her time, and her money into a circus that wasn't hers. She had chosen herself. And though the backlash was brutal, the freedom was undeniable. Daniel, however, struggled. He paced the living room, phone buzzing every few minutes with new messages from his family, His mother begged. His cousins lectured. Jason raged. "They're saying you're tearing us apart," Daniel admitted one night, his voice heavy with guilt. Emily touched his hand gently. "I'm not tearing your family apart. I'm just refusing to let them tear me apart." Her words sank deep. Daniel saw the truth in them, but the weight of family loyalty pulled at him like chains. Then came the wedding week. Photos flooded social media. Chloe surrounded by smiling bridesmaids in matching dresses, Jason raising a glass, the whole family laughing under strings of fairy lights. Emily watched from her phone, sitting on the couch in her pajamas, and for a moment, a pang of sadness stabbed her heart. She could have been there, dressed up, fitting in, smiling for the camera. But then she remembered the price of that smile, the silence of her own pain, the exhaustion of hiding who she really was. And she realized she wasn't missing out. She was protecting herself. When Jason returned from the honeymoon, he wasted no time. He blocked Emily on social media, stopped answering Daniel's calls, and told the rest of the family that Emily was no longer welcome at gatherings. It stung, but it wasn't surprising. What was surprising, though, was the shift that followed. Quietly, a cousin reached out, then an aunt, then even Daniel's younger sister. One by one, people began to whisper the same thing. Jason and Chloe went too far. Apparently, Emily wasn't the only one who had felt the pressure, the endless demands, the entitlement. Others had gritted their teeth and gone along, afraid of being the target. But Emily's stand, her refusal, planted a seed of doubt in the family's mind. Maybe she wasn't the villain after all. Maybe she was the only one brave enough to say out loud what they were all thinking. One evening, Emily sat on the porch with Daniel, watching the sun dip below the horizon. He squeezed her hand. "I'm proud of you," he said softly. "You showed me what real strength looks like." Tears welled in her eyes, but they were tears of relief, not pain. Because despite everything, despite the anger, the exile, the family drama, Emily had won something priceless. Her dignity, her peace, her future, and soon, she hoped, her dream of motherhood. Before I wrap this up, don't forget to like this video and subscribe. Stories like Emily's remind us that family isn't about blind obedience. It's about respect. And sometimes respect means standing up, even when everyone else is sitting down. Months later, the wounds were still there, but they were healing. Emily no longer felt the crushing weight of Jason's judgment. She no longer trembled when the phone rang. She had learned a lesson she would carry forever. Not every battle is worth fighting, but some battles, like protecting your heart, are worth everything. She looked at Daniel and whispered, "We'll be okay." And for the first time in a long time, she truly believed it. Because at the end of the day, here's the truth. Family doesn't make you whole. Your choices, your boundaries, your courage, that's what makes you whole. And Emily chose herself. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story, please give it a thumbs up and share it with your friends.